right, so cool. So Scott, thank you so much for coming by the booth. You are with a company called Revolv, right? So tell us a little bit about Revolv and what does you do.
Sure. So Revolv was founded with a mission to help simplify and accelerate our electric vehicle adoption in commercial fleets. We're focused on Class 2 to Class 8 vehicles under what is best known as a full service model. Some people have talked about it as a transportation as a service model, but we wrap the vehicle, charging infrastructure, electricity, maintenance, all into a single fixed price contract for fleets. Our goal is to be a massive easy button for fleets to make that transition to electrification.
Interesting. And when you're making that transition, I mean, are you helping to take like existing fleets and utilize their trucks to make them more efficient, or you're swapping out the fleets completely for new equipment?
Yeah, completely swap out for new equipment. We know some companies are starting to think about conversions of vehicles, but we think that that's really just a short-term solution that has a host of technical risks associated with it that some fleets are well positioned to be able to manage, but most fleets are not. Our focus is on helping identify which vehicles within a fleet are best suited to be electrified, because what you often hear from folks is this idea that electrification is the panacea and solution for everything, and it's not. But it is a better solution in some instances, but not in all solutions. So the trick for fleets is to figure out which markets, which facilities, which vehicles, which routes are suited for electrification, and that's where Revolv comes in to help them.
Interesting. So I'm curious, when you start to look at that, and we've had like a few folks from the battery world on the podcast before, specifically talking about forklift batteries in a sense, and what makes sense to switch to lithium, or what makes sense to stay with lead acid, and all those different cases. So I'm curious from the fleet perspective, when you're looking at these fleets, I mean, what is typically the most identifiable type of vehicle or type of route that these trucks or vehicles are running that is probably the most likely to get switched to electric?
Yeah, it's a great question. Where to start, right?
Ooh, start anywhere.
Yeah. No, where to start for a fleet too.
Where to start?
I know where to start, but no, in all seriousness, the thing I think that's most important to recognize is that picking up on my comment about where EVs are the best suited in a fleet, understanding that electric vehicles perform better on stop and go, short traffic routes, that are not in highway miles, in climates that don't require a lot of heating and cooling in the summer and the winters, in terrains that are relatively flat and not too elevated. So when we start to sift through how the vehicle is used at the bottom level, then you step up a level and say, okay, in which jurisdictions have the best incentives to install charging infrastructure, and which markets have the best incentives to be able to help buy down the cost of the vehicle. So it's really this layering approach where you start with the use case of the vehicle and you start building up, because our objective is to find the applications where fleets get an economically compelling solution at or below cost, so savings at operational parity, and to let the environmental benefits flow through as a tertiary benefit. That's the only way we really help fleets accelerate, is by solving their two primary most important issues, which is cost and performance.
Very interesting. And on that same regard, I mean, when you're looking at the fleet and you're starting to transition to electric, I mean, I think taking care of the vehicles themselves is one thing, right? But do you guys also then do recommendations and handle the kind of the charging infrastructure too?
Yeah, very much.
Electrification.
That's a foundational point. I think that's one of the things that we think we do particularly well. We like to I use a term that's used in the construction space quite a bit, which is called one throat to choke. This idea that there's a single counterparty that's responsible for everything. We are accountable and responsible for picking the right hardware, vehicle, and charger. We're responsible for making sure it's up and available across the entire ecosystem, systems approach. And if we're not, we suffer economically if we're not making sure that's available. So unlike a lot of solutions that fleets say, they hear from an OEM or a provider that says, hey, here's my best vehicle, but there's really no, other than the warranty, which is not uptime, there's no skin in the game. So what we like to think about ourselves is because we warehouse the technology risk for fleets and we're along with them on the ride, that we sit on the same side of the table as them, and we win when they win.
Definitely, and I think that makes so much sense too, because it kind of goes hand in hand. It's one thing to get the vehicle, but then how are you going to power it, right? I mean, it's such an important part of that whole aspect and the whole idea of electrifying the fleet and then switching over, right? So as you look at that, and as we're here at the show and talking to people, I mean, what seems to be people's biggest concerns or problems they're trying to solve around their fleets and trying to electrify?
Yeah, great question. I think the first one is what I alluded to, which is where to start.
Right.
It can be a bit overwhelming, especially being at shows like this one, which has this amazing ecosystem of technology options to choose from, right? And there's a lot of press in the sector, but having a fleet be able to sift through that, understand what's the noise from the signal is really the hardest thing. So I think for fleets, I would highly suggest that they find people who are already doing it, right? Like, because if they're struggling to figure out where to start, talk to other fleets, talk to other resources that might be a valuable resource. People have gone down this road before. Right. They're not calling us. They can certainly, there's lots of fleets who have experimented. Number two, find a partner that's invested in their success, most importantly, so that they're not, so they will win with them. And the last thing is focus on performance. I used this analogy on this panel yesterday. If you think about the EV ecosystem, think about it like a stereo system. If performance is sound, right, the quality of your experience with EVs is going to be defined by the weakest link in that system, right? You're going to have the best speakers, the best amplifier, but if you have the worst, speaker wire in between, your performance is going to be a fraction of that. And the same thing is in the EV space, with this intersection of both hardware and software all coming together. You really have to pay special attention to the integration as opposed to the individual components.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a great thought there, because I mean, you have to kind of get everything, and it's much much outside the warehouse and inside the warehouse. Everything kind of needs to flow together and connect to be able to give you that final positive outcome that you're looking for, get the full benefits of that. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm curious from your perspective on the electrification of fleets. I mean, how are we, and where do you think we're heading in terms of people starting to invest in just making their fleets fully electric, and are we going to see I guess gas powered vehicles and fleets really start to decline soon, or where are we out there?
I think we're in the first inning on the way from home base to the first base. We're way early in the process, right? I would say, and it's hard to come to terms with that. But if you come at the idea that electrification is going to be a better economic solution for fleets eventually, there's an inevitability around electrification. Not in every application, but for some applications, there's a deep hunt on for internal combustion vehicles, which are going to be the right solution for some fleets. We don't believe it's a one technology race. But when you think about where the sector is going, you've got rising costs on internal combustion and declining EV costs on the other side. So it's really about finding the markets and applications that are at that intersection point. The one thing I would leave with people is often we hear from fleets is, I don't want to go first because there's a cost of being too early. But particularly in jurisdictions which are starting to put regulations in place, I'd encourage fleets to start thinking about what is the cost of being too late, right? If EVs are eventually going to be a cost advantage, it's very important. Think about the early movers as an investment as opposed to a cost. An investment in building knowledge in your organization, about building competency, about building confidence, all those things. So don't swing for the fence, to keep the analogy, but don't swing for the fence, but start, most importantly.
All right, very interesting stuff, and I think it makes total sense, and it's great to see too that you guys are taking the approach to advising people and letting them know, that your whole fleet doesn't need to be electrified like immediately. You can take those gradual steps in your evolution and to get to that point. So it's really interesting what you guys are doing at Revolv. So I appreciate you coming by and giving us some insights here from this perspective.
Thanks for having us.
If people are interested in learning more about Revolv, how can they do that?
Yeah, I encourage people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. We're active on LinkedIn at Revolv. Also, feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. I'm happy to respond. What we like to say is we like to help fleets even who might not be our direct customer, because we want to think about ourselves as being a resource to the sector, sharing knowledge and lessons that we have. So follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll continue to post content that we think is relevant to people considering what the journey that's in front of them.
All right, very interesting stuff. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming by the booth.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
All right, have a good one.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.